Welcome to my channel Sella Buzz. The Vatican declared earlier today, Pope Francis passed away this morning. Pope Francis is currently 88 years old. Real estate assets and wealth are topics of interest and curiosity provided due of his huge profile. Everyone is curious. After his passing, what he left behind, is said to have left a wealth behind that brought his family to tears. Let's find out exactly what he left behind. Pope Francis's wealth as the Roman Catholic Church's leader. Pope Francis led the Church in more than 1.3 there are billions of Catholics worldwide. Reports state that this made him one among the most influential religious and political people. In 2013, he was elected Pope, following the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. It's challenging to pinpoint just how Pope Francis has a lot of money, especially considering the nature of his role as he did not serve as the head of the Catholic Church, possess personal wealth similar to the majority of his caliber rather than when individuals talk about. When they talk about his money, they typically Vatican assets that include anything that belongs to the Church. But Pope Francis had frequently shown a dedication to humility and simplicity. Unlike his predecessors, the popes living in luxury, he opted for a more humble lifestyle as a result of which his riches are rather mild in comparison to others. According to certain reports, his net worth is roughly $16 million, regardless of how much. This has more to do with personal property than compared to the Vatican's resources. It is important to remember that the institution of the Church, has much greater wealth than its leaders according to some sources. Vatican wealth is estimated to be between 10 and 15 billion, but it is hard to ascertain the precise value of the assets, comprise monetary assets and valuable qualities of art collections and items from history, that Pope Francis did not directly oversee all of this money, yet he was in charge of supervising it as the Catholic Church's leader, not the. What about Vatican's monthly compensation from the Pope of the Vatican? Francis was not given the customary wage that the Vatican verified in 2001 that he had never taken payment for the Church prior to his appointment as Pope. Rather, he had access to every infrastructure and resources required to carry out his responsibilities, which include the residence at the Vatican's Apostolic Palace, covers the security of his living expenditures, travel and give back to the charity that deals with the idea of pay. In the conventional sense is not applicable to the Pope's revenue, is derived from the money once governed the Vatican, and its different activities, such as contributions from Catholics, like the collection of Peter's Pensa fund called Collection, provides funding for the Vatican's charitable endeavors and the Pope's activities. The Vatican has a representative annual budget of roughly 300 million darn. This contributes to its global funding activities that are funded by the budget, such as diplomatic or religious ceremonies, work and philanthropic activities. Although Pope Francis emphasized that the Church ought to lead a modest life and aid the underprivileged, reduce needless expenditures at the Vatican, calling for more openness and effectiveness of operations. When discussing his wealth, many people wonder if Pope Francis owns a home or other property. Pope Francis didn't own any properties. House as the leader, as most people do. He resided in the Catholic Church's Vatican City's Apostolic Palace. The Papal Palace is a huge historic edifice. The Pope's residence is in the palace. Meeting rooms, offices, and chapels are his residence during his time as Pope. But according to Pope Francis, he would rather a more straightforward way of living than his prior to him. He decided to live in a little structure in the Vatican, known as the House of St. Martha Domus Sancti. This is Martha's guest house. Location is considerably easier, enabling him to reside close to other cardinals and priests. His choice demonstrated his dedication to modesty, as he feels the Pope ought to not lead a solitary or luxurious life. The setting of the Pope's residence is among the most crucial and safe where Vatican City is a separate. The residence of the Pope in the city-state is well protected when his residential area. The Vatican as a whole isn't fancy, extremely wealthy and strong. It owns land, renowned artwork and priceless historical things that the Vatican might not be a nation that makes money similarly to other countries, but it does contain a lot of important resources that the Vatican receives riches from a variety of sources, including the Vatican possesses some of the most priceless items of art over the world, including well-known pieces by artists such as Raphael, Michelangelo, and these works by Leonardo da Vinci are a part of the Vatican's museums, is not only an assortment of religious artwork, they also demonstrate the Church's enormous wealth and influence, its significance to culture. Secondly, the Vatican holds substantial properties in numerous regions of the world, such as hospitals, schools, churches, and the Vatican even possesses farms, important structures in large cities like as Rome and other nations. Make one of its biggest assets is real estate, wealth-generating sources, but did he leave any, will deliver these to his family. Soon the Vatican will also contribute its money in a number of places, such as the companies, real estate, and the stock market. It takes part in international financial actions carried out by the Vatican Bank, formally recognized as the Institute for. This bank supports the works of religion in overseeing the Vatican's financial operations and backs the Catholic Church's efforts globally. And finally, the Vatican gets a lot of donations from, for example, Catholics observe Peter's Pence, the Pope's collection supports charitable work, as well as other church-related activities. Despite the Vatican's significant, Pope Francis has utilized his wealth to assist others. He concentrated on helping the Church's purpose, particularly aiding the poor people, combating social injustice, and Pope Francis's concern for others, one of the main sources of financial history. During his pontificate, Pope Francis focused on helping the underprivileged and disenfranchised, frequently voiced opposition to economic disparity, and promoted social. He also made sure the Church used justice, its assets, to support the public. Pope Francis lauded the popular. These movements are composed of common people collaborating for justice. As he frequently stated, these movements show our strength, assisting in the battle against selfishness and emphasizing aiding the underprivileged. And he also talked in favor of the common good, favorably of liberation theology. He commended Gustavo Gutierrez, its founder, who relates the battle to faith, opposing injustice and poverty in 2024 while meeting with an organization called DUP that brings together Marxists and Christians. Pope Francis stated the following for discussion. Groups cooperate toward a common objective, toward a more equitable and better world in the future. September 24th of that year, he once more demanded a universal basic income in order to assist everyone in meeting their fundamental needs, also advocated for increased taxes on, according to billionaires, extreme wealth ought to be applied to aid people in need. Considering the Pope's enormous investments in the underprivileged and charitable institutions, he gave a small portion of his fortune to his. Could family members be the cause? Were they anticipating more tears? Keep an eye out. We'll soon learn the Pope was a man who donated to the people, more than what society gave him. He's gone, and the world will miss him. But before talking about his legacy, let's examine some background information, tales pertaining to him and his. Pope Francis's death. Giorgio Bergoglio was chosen as the Pope on 13th of March 2013 following he adopted the name Francis. The declaration of Habamus's election, it was Cardinal Jean-Louis who created Papam. Later on, Turin Cardinal Christophe Schönborn revealed that the election of Bergoglio came following two signatures. One is a secret occurrence in one from a Latin and the conclave, a pair of Americans who were buddies with Schönborn. They muttered the name of Bergoglio, and Schönborn believed this to be an indication of the decision being guided by the Holy Spirit when Francis was chosen, rather than sitting on the throne of the Pope to accept congratulations. He got to his feet, displaying a new, informal strategy in his first Pope's presence on the balcony of St. He donned a plain white outfit at Peter's Basilica, instead of the red fur trim, cassock cape worn by earlier popes, had donned his iron pectoral, crucifix as well, served as Buenos Aires's archbishop rather than the gold one that was previously Pope's. First action following his election was intended to benefit the multitude of pilgrims in the square of St. Peter with the Orbi et Orbi's blessing, but before urged everyone in the square to say a prayer for Pope Benedict III, his predecessor 16th, and as the new Pope, for himself, identifying himself as the head of the inauguration of Pope Francis in Rome, taking place in St. Peter's on March 19, 2013 square. At the event he commemorated Mass with religious and political leaders. He highlighted in his homily St. Joseph during the Mass on his feast the day of his election, as Pope Francis had a sibling who was still living. Maria Elena Bergoglio, a sister, disclosed at one point she had prayed he wouldn't be selected. Pope. Atisai. The last conclave I worshipping that he won't be elected since I didn't want my sibling to go, she said on CNN in Spanish. It's a stance that was somewhat self-serving moment, she continued, and I prayed to the Holy Spirit would step in and ignore what me, but instead of listening to me, what it desired following his election as Pope Maria was instructed by Francis to inform the others about I am unable to call their family, he stated. We are all part of a large family, therefore, please give them my affection because if I'll call everyone to clear the Vatican coffers, Maria disclosed, did not attend his inauguration in Rome. My brother requested that we conserve money and spend it for the good deeds I'll perform, as he responds. Maria also shared, she said, something she feared he would turn into lonely in the let's not abandon him role. Francis is requesting that the church return to its trip, but we religious must accompany him on a few Pope Maria's and Francis's relatives, José, Ignacio Bergoglio, youngest son, have discussed their relationship in public. Additionally, one of the Pope's nieces, artist Cristina Bergoglio, is currently lives in Madrid, Spain, according to her in 2018. I no longer see him, she said of her uncle, not because I'm unwilling to, but rather because I like his work as a spiritual leader, messenger a lot, and since I was also rather busy at work. Those were the few family members that are aware of. Any other surviving family members have not participated in the general public. However, the public's perception of the Francis is frequently regarded as progressive, or William, a moderate Pope commentator. Salatine gave a lengthy explanation of his remarks. Queen 13 interview, especially his assertion that one must encounter God today's world and the manifestation of God himself in the historical disclosure in history as opposing and liberal conservative opinions, although some, I disagree that he is a liberal. The Vatican chastised certain French, Asians, and Italian news sources, press, for revealing that Francis had suggested that same-sex marriage is acceptable, or according to a Vatican spokeswoman, civil unions. His remarks had been misinterpreted. Features of Francis's public persona include his obvious empathy and his efforts and deeds of humility to continue being independent within. He frequently employed the bureaucracy of the Vatican. Landlines, and are said to have never possessed a smartphone or computer, in December 2013. The Advocate and Time Media referred to Francis as their person of Esquire magazine, also called the year he was that year's best-dressed man, because of the way his basic clothes roll. He was on the cover of Stone magazine. According to Fortune magazine's January 2014 ranking, he was ranked first on their list of the 50 top leaders. He was also a part of Forbes' rankings of the most influential individuals worldwide in 2014 and 2016. In the song Koi How You was released in March 2013, was devoted to Francis, and published in Portuguese and Brazilian, Italian, and Portuguese streets. In Europe was changed to Papa in La Plata, Argentina, in his honor Francisco, the Argentine. The Chamber of Deputies enacted legislation to make a unique coin in his honor, in papal souvenir sales in 2013, grew in proportion to his expanding. Pope Francis oversaw the popularity of 20 years of his first shared wedding ceremony. Couples. From Rome's Archdance on September 14, 2014. This occurred shortly before the Third Extraordinary General Assembly, regarding the family in the Senate of Bishops. The occasion was held from October 5 to Francis became the first on the 19th of 2016 Pope to make an account on Instagram. He achieved a record-breaking gain of more than 1 million in less than 12 hours on. He became the first on November 26, 2020, Pope to pen a piece of opinion for the Phi Kawaii. New York Times talking about things like CO-19 prohibitions on open assemblies and the necessity of worldwide unity following Pope Francis's passing. Francis was chosen at 76 years old, was said to be in excellent health. According to medical professionals, the lung tissue eliminated when he was a child did not greatly affect his general health, with the sole worry being diminished reserve of breath in the event of a respiratory illness. But he had experienced long-term lung damage as a result of this earlier process back in 2020. He was susceptible to wintertime ailments. Such Francis also fought with bronchitis and the flu, with sciatica and knee issues leading him to use a cane, or wheelchair. In 2021, there were suggestions that he might quit because of his health problems, although in June 2022, these rumors were rejected. Following his knee treatment, Francis led organized excursions to the Congo's Democratic Republic, and in an interview, South Sudan clarified that even if he hadn't given, he would step down if his health allowed it. Never stopped him from carrying out his responsibilities as the church's head during a journey to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He said in February 2023 that he had no intention of resigning at Thea Point in March. Francis was admitted to the hospital in Rome in 2023 because he had a respiratory illness, went back to observe the Easter Vigil. Holy Saturday Mass in April of that year. He had stomach surgery in June. After receiving a hernia diagnosis, Francis had made public use of a wheelchair because of ongoing knee pain, which, he admitted, needed surgery. That his persistent problems with mobility signaled the start of a slower stage throughout his pontificate, but was commended by Catholics with disabilities for creating his infirmity as a component of his outward persona. Francis was on February 14, 2025, admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital because due to illness, he had to stay longer, due to a multimicrobiological infection in his lungs and both. The Vatican reported that he had pneumonia, stayed as critical, and he was given transfusions of blood and high-flow oxygen. It was declared on February 23rd that Francis was going through an early stage of kidney failure, despite the fact that his illness was reportedly under control in February. There was a minor improvement on the 26th. However, after 2 days, he experienced a bronchial spasm and vomit inhalation, which needed mechanical ventilation that is non-invasive. The outlook was explained as being protected by, according to reports on March 3rd, he had been taken off of the mechanical ventilation system and afterward was regaining the Vatican. Revealed that Francis had gone through 2 instances of acute respiratory inadequacy after another significant mechanical ventilation was in decline. Started up again on March 6th, and on March 19th, Francis was said to be no longer using nighttime mechanical ventilation. When his medical professionals verified that the infection was contained, but not completely settled, he was released from the hospital soon after. On March 23rd, from his balcony, he was blessing a crowd, anticipated to spend a minimum of 2 months recuperating at his Doma home. Vatican City's Sancti Martha shortened his workday and made his first appearance in public since his hospitalization. On Pope's Day in April, Francis died on this day at the age of 88. He passed away on Easter Monday, April 24, 2025, at his home in Domus Sancta Martha. Cardinal Kevin Frell declared his passing on the television network of the Vatican and in a video statement, but the precise reason for Italian death has not been reported. Unofficial sources have said that it was probably brought on by a brain-related problem. Perhaps a stroke that led to his death caused a 9-day papal interregnum of lamentation called the Novum. The Pope's funeral was held for 9 days. Observing custom was supposed to take about 4 to 6 days following his passing. Additionally, it was expected that he would be interred at the Santa Maria Basilica, according to his desires, Major. They anticipated that cardinal electors would assemble in Rome for the General Cardinals gathering where they determined the time and date of the forthcoming Papal Pope Francis's legacy during the conclave. Francis served as Buenos' archbishop, composed a work entitled Dialogues between Pope John Paul II and Fidel Castro. The first pope to visit Cuba was Paul II, and his visit had a profound effect on the nation in May 2015. Years later, Pope Francis and Raul Castro met Castro, who later claimed that he was thinking of going back to the Catholic Church during a press conference. I read all the Pope's speeches, remarks, and whether he continues to this up, I'll resume my prayers and go back to the Church, said Pope Francis. Performed a significant part in aiding rebuild the diplomatic ties between Cuba and the United States, which were formally declared on December 17, 2014, that the work Pope Francis behind the scenes and the Canadian government assisted in bringing both nations to the table after the President Obama requested his backing at a March 2014 visit to the Vatican generally. The accord was viewed as a success. Francis, who had the confidence of the presidents of the US and Cuba, and was capable of fostering trust amongst them while traveling to the United Pope Francis in September 2015 visited Cuba in May 2014. Pope Francis traveled to Israel, and the importance of Palestinian territory acts that are symbolic to both sides of the dispute. He went to sacred locations like Yad Vashem's Western Wall during the Holocaust, the Church of the Holy, and the Memorial. Additionally, he became the first pope to go to Theodore Herzl's tomb, originator of contemporary Zionism, in a big way. He traveled from Jordan into the West Bank, instead of via Israel, which many regarded as a sign of appreciation for Pope Francis also supports Palestinian statehood. Met with representatives of Israel, and he extended an invitation to Palestine, Israeli officials, and President Mahmoud Abbas. President Shimon leads a prayer for peace in Paris. Summit in the Vatican, that both, after being welcomed. At Bethlehem, he gave a speech with Abbas and rejoice mass at the Nativity Church. Additionally offered prayers at a portion of the Israeli went to a memorial and the West Bank barrier for terror victims at the request of Benjamin, Prime Minister of Israel. While there, Netanyahu also met with religious authorities, such as the chief rabbis of Jerusalem, Grand Mufti Israel, and the Western Rabbi. May 2015. Pope Francis applauded the Wall Abbas, referring to him as a gnat. About the same moment, the Angel of Peace. The Vatican formally acknowledged the state of Palestine through the signing of the Francis Treaty, expressed optimism that peace negotiations between Israel and Palestine might get back together. Additionally, Abbas's visit took place during the two Palestinian nuns were canonized in May 2021, with a surge in violence, and Francis urged for peace in Jerusalem once more, between Palestinians and Israelis during his Regina Coeli residence after the attack on Israel by Hamas in October 2023. Pope Francis denounced the assault. Francis denounced the crackdown on ISIL-attacked Christians and encouraged the use of using force to prevent extremists from Islam from attacking Iraqi religious minorities. He encountered Yazidi refugees in January 2018 throughout Europe and voiced his backing for their freedom of religion. He also urged the global community to stay responseless and mute witnesses to the genocide of the Yazidi in February. Francis traveled to Abu Dhabi United in 2019, Arab Emirates, at the request of Zayed Al Nahyan. Mohammed bin became the Mass was celebrated by the first pope on the Arabian Peninsula, was visited by over 120,000 people in attendance at Zed Sports City March. At the stadium, Francis hosted a landmark gathering in 2012 with the leading Shiite cleric in Iraq, Grand Ali al-Sistani, Ayatollah, and went to Ura, location commonly recognized as the Abraham's birthplace, where he and the cleric from Iraq exhorted the Muslim and cooperation among Christian communities for harmonious cohabitation. In September, Pope Francis traveled to Indonesia in 2024, nation with the biggest Muslim population people in the area, where he went discussion between religions at Istiqlal Jakarta Mosque and was greeted by Pope Dr. Nasiruddin Umar, Grand Imamand. The joint was signed by the grandmother as well. Istiqlal's Declaration 2024, highlighting the shared values, to every religious tradition be successfully encouraged, to defeat violent and uncaring culture, and encourage peace and reconciliation. Additionally, the declaration was read and attended by officials from a range of religions, such as Hinduism and Protestantism, Confucianists, Buddhists, and folklore practitioners. Controversies surrounding faiths. Francis, Pope, as Archbishop of Jorge, Bergoglio, a Buenos Aires, publicly rejected a bill that would have legalized same-sex Argentina's Senate-approved marriage. He wrote a letter in 2010 regarding the bill, while the bill was being opposed, which came under fire for utilizing what some characterized as antiquated and medieval. The church uses language as a source, even described it as a strategic error. That helped make the bill successful. Pope Francis displayed a more hospitable position on LGBT matters compared to his priors. In July 2013, his well-known "Who Am I to Pass Judgment?" remark on LGBT individuals received a lot of attention. He constantly underlined the significance of agreeing to and going with LGBT people, including LGBT kids, He reiterated the Catholic teaching that a man and a woman should get married, and a lady. He backed in same-sex civil unions as a means of providing legal safeguards for same-sex partnerships under the dicastery for his papacy theology of the faith attested to the fact that people who identify as transgender can get baptized and enabled same-sex couples to be blessed. In the Fiducia Supplicants document, he met a large number of LGBT activists and individuals. In 2013, he was even privately named the Advocate's Person of the Year American LGBT publication. But Pope Francis was less understanding on he made reference to gender and transgender concerns. Theory and instructing kids on procedures that are gender-affirming as colonization of ideas in September. He met with Kim Davis, a county official, in 2015. Clerk who was imprisoned for not grant same-sex marriage licenses couples. He received criticism in August 2000 for implying that children who identify as gay should seek mental health care in January. In 2020, during the third interview, Francis condemned the criminalization of, he also called homosexuality unfair, and asked the Church to differentiate between sin and asking bishops to approve such a crime, legislation to reevaluate their stances. He stated these things again in February 2023. On a theological level, there was disagreement. Following the release of Amoris Laetitia specifically, it concerned whether it altered the Catholic Church's regulations regarding permitting divorced individuals who have civilly remarried to obtain the penance sacraments and the Eucharist. Francis stated in the document that it is crucial for those who have divorced in the new unions to experience the Church as a part of him. Additionally demanded a responsible individual and individual pastoral discernment. Examples pointing forth that whereas general guidelines are significant, but they can't cover every particular circumstance, which resulted in several opinions on how the document should be used by bishops everywhere. July 2017 saw the formation of a conservative laypeople and clergy scholars released AIA filial corrective that charges Francis with advancing 7 erroneous concepts by his words, deeds, and omissions throughout. Francis took office as Pope on February 4, 2019, and Allah's grandmother, Ahmed El-Tab, signed the Human Fraternity document, promoting global harmony and coexistence. The document encourages harmonious cohabitation among various religions and inspired the UN to announce the International Human Fraternity Day. Some detractors concentrated on a portion of the paper that declared, God willed the religious variety and pluralism, language, race, sex, and color in his wisdom, said Chad, a Catholic theologian. This sentence bothered Pecknold, and possibly troublesome, for certain Catholic onlookers believed it might allude to God's lenient will, which permits the presence of evil and diversity on the planet. But Bishop, according to Athanasius Schneider, Pope Francis explained that he was talking about Pope's lenient will. In July 2021, Traditio Custodes was given an apostolic letter in which his humorum of former Pope Benedict XVI Pontificum and put new limitations in place. The letter during the customary Latin liturgy granted bishops the authority to approve or prohibit in their dioceses. The Latin Mass also mandated that recently ordained priests look for consent prior to commemorating the elderly. This modification was criticized by numerous well-known cardinals, including Ludwig Miller and Raymond Leo Burke and Joseph Zahn, in addition to numerous lay Edwin Penton's article in the National Catholic Register, which many people viewed limitations as needless, excessively severe, and imposed. Soon after, in December 2023, the Vatican's The Doctrine of the Dicastery Fiducia Supplicants were released by faith. This document introduced and clarified changes to the way the Church treats such atypical relationships, which are described as monogamous partnerships and sentimental, but haven't entailed a. The document permitted Catholic marriage. Priests will provide impromptu blessings to couples of the same sex and opposite sex who are civilly married and unmarried relationships, in which at least one individual was separated without obtaining in the emergence of annulment fiducia supplicant substantial dispute, often between conservative Catholic clergy members and cardinals and other high-ranking church officials. Muller, Gard Ludwig, referred to the paper as blasphemous and sacrificial, while Robert Serra, a cardinal, explained that such couples' blessings are considered heretical. that on January 11th undercuts the Church Fredolin Mbango Basungu. Cardinal declared that the whole African Episcopal meetings at the Symposium of African Episcopal Conferences and the CCM in Madagascar would refuse blessings. He also cautioned same-sex couples that scandals could result from such favors in Africa. Reported the Pope's wealth. Surprise. Please share it with us in the comments. Like, share, and comment if you liked this video. For more, please subscribe to this channel. Celebrity Summary prior to seeing the additional films displayed on your screen.